cynical and negative in an environment of increasing competition and clutter and so on. And people, every day there's something in the media or in the news that we're consuming, wherever we get it from, about organisations and leaders that are failing. Is that lowering the available level, the level of trust that we can achieve? Do you think as a society we're as open to being trusting?
It's a really good question. Australia is, we're a very cynical bunch here in Australia, and year after year, when we look at the data, Australia ranks all of those institutions that we measure, media and government and business, not-for-profits. We generally rank people pretty poorly on the trust scale. It's quite interesting. But having said that, I think that there have been some, amazing corporate and, mainly corporate issues. Obviously, we've got a very unusual political landscape still here in Australia. So, I think there are definitely a lot of macro challenges that are going to be really interesting to see how that's played out with our results this year. There's no doubt about that.
Michelle, I'm really interested in your take on the word authenticity. It's a word that I hear it so much now. It seems to be the new word in the past year or two. How necessary is authenticity in, say, leader communication? And two, how achievable is it?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it is achievable. And I think when you see it play out well, it's typically when you see a leader who has been incredibly authentic to their own personal values, the business values. They've been incredibly transparent and consistent with their messages. I think authenticity is definitely the way to go. I think a lot of organisations, particularly some in Australia, still are challenged by whether or not that's possible. I think it's critical. It's absolutely critical, particularly when we're dealing with such a transparent communications world as we live in now. I don't think you can hide, and I think if you do hide, you get caught out, and you get caught out quickly and very visibly.
Yeah, and then you've made things worse for yourself.
Exactly. Hard to come back from that.
When I've been talking with people about blogging and tweeting, some of the other these accord with some other research I've seen that says that with tweeting, for example, the great volume of tweets that are followed are from a very small number of tweeters, and very often they're from the media, from the mainstream media. And if we look at tweet level and blog level, unless I'm reading it incorrectly, the highest level of influence, trust, etc., and pure and straight out pumping content out is the mainstream media.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's great about those tools is that you can identify the key influences, and it does change depending upon the category or changes because of the industry that you're looking at. There are some bloggers in the food space, for example, who write regularly, and they're incredibly influential. In the mum space, there are some very high profile and only a handful of people who are very key influencers, and without being able to get those people on board, it makes it pretty challenging. So it's really important to find out who those key people are.
I just had a kind of a cursory overview. Look, can you does blog level and tweet level break down into industry sectors? So if you're in the finance industry, you can look at those.
Totally.
Do you pay for those, or are they free?
No, they're free.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, and you guys run that. That's something that
we do. Yeah. We do. So I think that a guy actually in our UK office developed.
So obviously the media, the mainstream traditional media, are still very much part of the game when it comes to communicating with audiences, with owning audiences. Is that fair? Is that right?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. How much is that changing? How much is and how is the way you have to work as a communicator or as a brand changing because of social and digital and so on?
Yeah, sure. I think it's changed changing quickly and changing very dramatically. We've coined an approach which we call transmedia storytelling, and I think it helps talk about the changes because, traditionally communications experts have gone to the traditional media with content, and increasingly over the last few years we've then thought of social as a new channel, and we've looked at developing content for social. I think what's happening now is that we are thinking more strategically and thinking more creatively about content that can actually work across various spheres. So whether it be the traditional media, whether it be the social media, whether it be what we like to call hybrid media, which is, I guess, probably blogs.
Yep.
But then more and more you've got owned media, and I think what we're seeing is a real trend around companies and brands realising that in actual fact they are media companies in their own right. I mean, take KFC for example. They have over 500,000 fans on their Facebook page here in Australia.
Wow.
Now, pitching a story about KFC to the Sydney Morning Herald, you're not going to get anywhere near opportunities to see or reach as you would just playing that content out on their Facebook page.
Yeah. The government's looking at legislating to tell some of these companies, probably not KFC, but more like Telstra, Apple, etc., you're now a media company, treating websites like television stations.
Exactly.
So that's going to be fun. Give you plenty of things to help people with. Michelle, recently the Australian published a survey, John Jury's survey of CEOs, and he asked them 5 questions. I'll just ask you the 5th question, which I thought was an interesting litmus test of the switched onness of some of the CEOs. The question is, if you had the ability to make one change to improve the nation, what would it be?
Can I have 2 answers to that? 2 things. Look, one is education. I'm incredibly passionate about the importance of education as a nation-building platform, and I think there are still some major issues around access to education in this country, and if we really want to be the nation that I think we want to be in years to come, I think we need to ask ourselves some very, very hard questions around that. If I may put a second on the table, I'm very passionate about immigration. I'm very passionate about our changing demographics. Here we have an ageing population, as everybody realises, and I again think we need to ask ourselves some very tough questions about immigration and how important it is in terms of us achieving our future direction.
Yeah, terrific. All right, well, thanks very much, Michelle. Appreciate that. Great advice. If we want to look at your new website, we should wait until
mid-January.
Okay, nice. Thanks very much for speaking today.
No problem. Good to see you.